Okay, so I am here for video reflection number 1 for diversity in the workforce. So this reflection is talking about the where are you. So for this one, I was looking at different treaties that exist today in the place that I am. I am from Canada, obviously. I am not a visible minority, so I chose a treaty that location-wise was where I'm from, or I should say is where I'm from. So I am originally from Windsor. I do live in Tecumseh today, but I'm gonna choose Windsor just for the sake of this journal. I just think the one that I found that is for Windsor was really interesting. So that's the one I'm gonna be talking about. So the treaty document in that relevant location that exists today for Windsor is the McKee Purchase, or Treaty 2. So the current community, that the area that the treaty was originated, includes Windsor, Chatham-Kent, and a part of London. So obviously for this one, we're focusing on the part of Windsor. So what is obviously the McKee Purchase? That's really important to note. So the McKee Purchase essentially was an exchange between several First Nations groups, including the Ottawa, the Potawatomi, and the Chippewa. And it was between these First Nation groups and the British Crown. And essentially, it was the British Crown purchasing the land that belonged to these First Nations groups. So the territory, I should say, the treaty included was the southernmost point of Canada, which is Point Pelee. So the British Crown bought this piece of land, and in exchange, they gave the First Nations groups that I mentioned payment in the form of clothes, cloth, linen, tools for hunting and cooking, glasses, and then different, sorry about the noise, that's my cat. Okay, sorry. Yeah, but just different hygienic things, like some combs, different accessories, things of that nature. By the way, I found all this information on ontario.ca. It's a government website that talks all about these different treaties. So that's where I've got that information. So that was basically the exchange of how that took place. I should mention the date as well. It took place, it was signed on May 19th of 1790. There were over 50 signatories on this treaty, including settlers and Indigenous leaders. So I thought that was very interesting. Obviously pertains location-wise to where I am. Obviously it's really interesting to think that all these treaties, no matter where you're from, it's really bizarre to think that, if they had never been signed, how different our lives would be today. And obviously, had the piece of land not been sold to British Crown, and obviously then, as it's progressed into today, it would be extremely different. So talking a little bit about the equity of exchange, I definitely think bit unequal. I mean, I think at the time people are really focusing on what they need. So I think for payment, including things like clothes and linen and hunting tools, that is what First Nations and Indigenous people rely on for survival. They do a lot of it themselves, whereas, I don't know about maybe back then, but definitely nowadays, people just go to the grocery store or they go to the store and they buy whatever they need. These people were literally they needed that for survival. So I think it's really, I don't want to say it's unequitable, because I don't necessarily think that that's the right word to use. I definitely think, though, that in the long run, if we look at the grand scheme of back then to today, I definitely don't think it was a long-term the best idea, but I think they'd have to do what they have to do to survive and to get the resources that they need for survival. I did learn quite a bit just in general about these treaties, by doing research and things of that nature. Honestly, I don't know if it maybe makes me sound really uneducated or uncultured, but I honestly had no idea that there were this many treaties in and around our area, including like the Niagara Purchase, what else? The Toronto, I don't want to say it wrong, but where is it? The Toronto Purchase, okay, yeah. Toronto Purchase, yeah, just so many different treaties that cover, obviously, Treaty 35 as well, that includes like the area of LaSalle and Amherstburg as well. I also went to high school in LaSalle. I went to Sandwich, so I also thought about doing Treaty 35 as well, but I just found the McKee Purchase is more where I'm actually from and like the land where I was growing up. So I thought it was really interesting to see how unequitable maybe it would seem for what these First Nations and Indigenous groups would have received as their payment or in exchange for their land. I think society is it's obviously developed since these times when these treaties were signed. So I don't think anybody ever would have known the state that, First Nations peoples would be living in today, which is obviously a big issue. I mean, many places don't even have access to clean drinking water. That's a basic human right, and settlers just take it for granted. People that have come onto their land. So I think it makes you have a deep appreciation for it the more I think about it. And obviously we see with a lot of politics, and especially we saw at the last federal election, that was a really big topic of discussion, especially the debate. This is kind of off topic. It just really had me thinking about that when I was doing research for this, that's my cat again, sorry. It just really had me thinking that, we're out here talking about very, not unimportant, but in the retrospective of things. And if you think about it, the grand scheme of it, many of the topics that they were talking about were technology and, how are we going to spend the billions and billions of dollars that we have in Canada? Not anymore, but you know what I mean. And just so many topics that are important for society and the economy, etc. And then the topic of the Indigenous peoples and the First Nations, they came up, and there was the topic that there was really not even an access to clean drinking water. And it's like, well, that's the first issue. It's like we live in one of the most, I would argue, one of the most well-off countries in the world. We live in the best continent in the world, I would also say, and there's people who don't have access to clean drinking water. Like, that's, in my opinion, that's even more important than like a hunger crisis or a homeless crisis. It's like, that's like that is it. Like, if people do not have water, they're not surviving. And it's like, these are the people that we should be thanking. This is where we would not be here today without them. So it's really, I think, interesting. And that was something I was really surprised to find on the research that I did. And it just really made me think back to any of these times where I've heard, politicians bring this up and all of that. So it definitely makes me have a bit of a difference in my understanding, because it's not, something that I'm just going to, take for granted, I suppose. And not that I feel like I ever necessarily took it for granted, but I think it was definitely something that is easy to kind of forget. And, we thank our ancestors, and we thank, our parents and our grandparents for the life that we've been given. most of them anyway were not born in Canada, and they came here either with their parents or when they were young adults, married, whatever the case is. And I think we have a habit of thanking them and really putting them up on this pedestal, which they do deserve as well. But sorry, but I think it's it's really where we came from as well, and it's the history of this country, that it's like, we wouldn't be here without our parents and our grandparents, but we equally would not be here without these treaties that got signed, and really, in my opinion, almost like the sacrifice that First Nations and Indigenous people did for us. And obviously I don't think at the time they were thinking of it as a like they were giving something up. Like, they obviously at the time thought it was an exchange, and I just think in the retrospect, I think we owe them so much for that. Like, we, like I've said now multiple times, it's like we really wouldn't be here without them. So I think we owe them as Canadians and as a society, and especially our government. That's very important, and in my opinion really should be at the forefront of their, like, that should be number one thing that they're implementing and changing in this country, 100%. Any significant introspection or takeaways related? I honestly think this is pretty much it that I feel about this. I mean, I think it really just, this type of research and looking into it really gives you a new perspective. At least for me, it really gave me a new perspective on the importance of really remembering where you come from, not just within your family, but really the place that I sit. That it's like I said before, like, it's really weird to think about where I would be and where our family would have settled, and all these different factors that would have been so greatly changed had the McKee Purchase and the other treaties alike not coming into effect. And I definitely think the next time I visit, there's actually, so on the government website where I was getting most of my information, there's a federal plaque that commemorates McKee's Purchase, and is in Blenheim Memorial Park in Chatham, Kent. So I definitely think if I ever get out there, I'm gonna be interested to see it, now that I know a bit more about it. So yeah, I really enjoyed actually looking into this whole journal, like the contents of the journal, I should say, and discovering more about the where we are, and I look forward to doing the next journal, looking more into it. Thanks.